If you don't mind, I'd like to just kind of get right down to it. So everyone has a tight schedule today. We actually have a lot to cover in a short amount of time. The Outsourcing Institute has been hired by the Kodak team here present to help facilitate, if not accelerate, an HRO engagement. And particularly, what we're talking about here is an RPO engagement, as well as a contract labor engagement. And our focus, along with the help of a dream team of experts that we've assembled. Scott Goles is present here today. Our goal is to find a single solution provider with global capabilities for all the services I mentioned earlier, both perm and temp, if you will. And we need to do all of that in 90 days. That's the challenge. Actually, no, let me correct that. Actually, we need to do that in 6 weeks. So how do we get the transaction completed?
It's apparent from the get-go that the pressure's on. Clock is ticking. You could almost hear it. And there's basically zero flexibility with this deadline. So we really have our work cut out for us.
The vendor selection and contract signed in 60 days. Implementation in 90 days.
When Frank first presented me with the timeline, I thought it was extremely aggressive. And frankly, the last thing you want to do is set yourself up in front of a client to fail.
What's the impetus behind this?
On the talent side, you know, we need better talent. We need it faster than we've had it in the past. So there's some service improvements that we need to make and less handoffs. I talked earlier about multiple groups or individuals being involved in the process, and it causes confusion, it causes errors. And so we're looking for a simplification.
You know, the first step is probably defining what exactly has to happen at the end of 6 weeks.
In terms of an ideal solution, it would be to find one supplier on a global basis that can do the services for, you know, contingent labor, contract labor, recruitment, staffing, everything combined, but in a manner that they're going to bring the best quality to all of our needs in a very timely manner and meeting all of our expectations and doing it very cost effectively.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because we have our scope documented. Probably the areas that we need some input is around SOAs and pricing. And so we'd like your help to take a look at what we have. Is it good enough to send out? And then the next discussion we need to have is who do we send it to, right? So we have to get down to some of those details and then the timing around that. So what I'd like to do is outline our roadmap, right, our timeline. When is it that we need to have this document final? Who do we send it to? When do we send it? When do they respond? So kind of line that up and see how does that take us to the end of August, and what are the key activities so that we can make sure we have our resources aligned. So we need to really get to that level of detail today.
Okay, so Scott Goles, we have a fairly dramatic scenario here. Aggressive timeline, not too much flexibility on the deadline. Help us out.
You know, I think the biggest, we are under a hugely collapsed or condensed time frame here, so we can't do things the traditional way, right? So I think the biggest time suck in most RFIs, RFPs is the process itself of constructing the RFI, sending out the RFI, collecting it.
Do we need an RFP here? Do we not need an RFP, or is there some modified version that gets us in high-speed mode?
I don't think we need an RFP.
My honest opinion is if Kodak does this without an RFP process, we'll have to do the learning that we would have gotten out of the RFP process while we're doing the negotiations.
I have purchasing managers above me who are saying, you can't do that. You have to follow the process, because it's a double-edged sword. Because if we don't bring some people in to have discussions with them through an RFP, RFI, RFQ, whatever you want to call it, somebody could call up upper management and say, hey, I was never brought in here. They never questioned me. They never talked with me. But from the standpoint of where we are today in a whole different millennium of thinking, I agree with you that we have to cut through the process. We have to alter the process, adapt the process, and change it.
Well, as with many things at Kodak today, an accelerated timeline is a necessity, I would say, for us, given that we're going through a digital transformation. We have a need for speed. This is the last year of our digital transformation, as we've publicly stated, and so the need to really consolidate and leverage any global capabilities and pricing from our suppliers is essential for us to be successful.
One, since we've got such a compressed time frame ahead of us, we need to do things differently than we have in the past. We being the procurement process and cycle. So we can't go through the regular RFI, RFP, regular traditional RFP route, whatever you want to call it.
An RFP can be overwhelming. You should make every effort to keep everything concise, simple, to the point, and encourage the providers to listen to you, to keep it concise, simple, and to the point.
2, I think, is to build our base case. If we don't have the time and resources to get a base case done in its entirety, maybe we just focus on compiling existing service level. 3, I think, is to develop a short list of criteria so that we can also shortlist our list of vendors.
Another very difficult part of the process is narrowing the field down to the providers of choice. What's important to you, and identifying how they meet the criteria that's important to you. That can be pretty overwhelming.
So we reached out to our membership network, and the good news is that we got a good response. Bad news is that we have about 52 service providers who claim to do this. So the challenge here is to whittle that list of service providers who claim to provide these services, to whittle that down to a cogent long list, if you will, of people who can really do it. This is something that normally would easily take a month. We have to do that in a couple of days. So we really have our work cut out for us.
4, I think, is communicate, not only amongst this group, but within Kodak.
In my experience, the deals that have been less successful are deals in which the customer and the vendor did not bring to the table issues as they arise. It's important to deal with issues while they're small issues so they don't blow up and become big issues down the road.
I guess when you really boil it down from beginning to end, whether it's the team, whether it's the provider, it really gets down to communication.
And I think finally is from a collaboration standpoint, I may have used the term earlier when referring to this group, but also collaborate with vendors, which is going to be different than the traditional RFI, RFP route, right? We're going to ask them to present solutions to us, to Kodak, based upon their capabilities, as opposed to trying to force feed them into, an RFP response. So that's going to be a little bit different. Probably include that also in our communication message going throughout the organization also. Those are some initial thoughts. Obviously, we need to have a lot more discussion along those to really hit that 6-week time frame. So looking forward to working with you guys. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Okay, good. Let's do it.
We're going to engage the Outsourcing Institute here to help us with this project. I expect to learn a ton from the experts.
We really have our work cut out for us. This was one heck of a day for the entire team. And this meeting will only be surpassed, my prediction, will only be surpassed by the pressure and energy required for the next meeting, which will be vendor selection on steroids. That is going to be one tough, crazy day. I hope they're serving a lot of strong coffee.
We're going to need for you to start to develop some sort of a proposal for us. What you can do for Kodak.
It was weak, and I even scored them very low.
You came alone into the lion's den.
But I think after I listened to them today, I was impressed. I was wowed.
And I want to tell you, I'm impressed by that.
So this is vendor selection on steroids. I've never seen this many vendor presentations in such a short period of time. It's a bit mind-boggling, but we have no choice. This is the timeline, and we have to deliver.